What's up guys, it's Pliskin here. We're recording in the closet again because it's the weekend and people are blasting music, so you're gonna have to deal with the echo because otherwise you won't hear shit that I am saying. Anyways, you remember when they were marketing Metal Gear Solid 5? It was at that really annoying time where they were like, this is the Ground Zeroes map, and this is the Metal Gear Solid 5 map, which is 80 times bigger, and Venom's cock is 9 times bigger than Big Boss. Bigger! Yeah, that was like a really annoying point in games when like everyone was like, bigger means better. But what ended up happening was that Metal Gear Solid 5's maps, which were bigger, had all these really cool, well-designed areas used once or twice, and then they were completely forgotten about and never used again. Like this weird kind of foggy valley on the way to the place where you fight the man on fire. This is a really cool area that toys with that idea of safe zones, visibility, and I wish more happened here. But instead what happens is that you have these cool areas that are very one and done, and then you have a shit ton of what I like to call dead space. Just these wide open spaces that just don't have anything. You are just meant to blow through here on your horse, on D-Walker, in a car. Like there's barely any items to pick up, you don't really see much wildlife, occasionally you might see a truck driving around. But yeah, you get so much of this, and this is actually where you spend the majority of your time playing Phantom Pain. Not in these cool areas, but in the dead space zones. Now, if you've been subscribed to this channel for a while, you'll know I'm a very big fan of Ground Zeroes, and a big part of that is its map design. It feels like a really good Metal Gear base. You know, you have your areas of opportunity to do scouting with the in-scope, mark, do your shit like that. There's areas for sabotage, there's danger zones, there's safe zones to recollect yourself. It's really fucking solid. There is not a single part of Ground Zeroes map that I would refer to as dead space. But I figured today, what we could talk about is how this kind of map design philosophy could have been translated to Metal Gear Solid 5 and honestly future Metal Gear games, because again, the series has a future now, yay! But yeah, like let's talk about how a map that's a little bigger than Ground Zeroes, but a lot smaller than Metal Gear Solid 5, could be made to the series' benefit. Now in the last couple of videos, I've talked about what I like to call a donut level design. So basically just imagine a jelly-filled donut. You have the outside of the donut, you have the icing of the donut, you have the inner rung of the donut, and then you have the middle that's filled with jelly. Okay? So when I refer to Metal Gear Solid when I'm talking about this, imagine that outer layer of the donut right there is where Snake would use the in-scope to scope in and find things out. See what's going on in the jelly, see what's going on in the inner, and see what's going on in the icing. The icing is where Snake will find a lot of the sandbox elements. He'll find his weapons, he'll find his items, he'll find places to sabotage that'll make that, base that's hiding in the inner jelly a lot weaker. Think all the little outposts in Snake Eater. The inner part would be kind of like those danger zones before you get into the base. Think about Ground Zeroes heliport. Somewhere where if you get caught, the consequences are going to be pretty extreme. And then of course you have the jelly itself. The jelly itself would be those hardcore interiors where you fight Metal Gear, where that big bad guy would be. Now I've brought this up before, but I've never really explained it straight on, I feel, so hopefully from here on out you'll know what I'm talking about when I bring that up. But now before we go ahead and dive deeper into this kind of Metal Gear that's smaller than Metal Gear Solid 5, a small Metal Gear Solid 5 if you will, I want to talk about other games that either are short in length or have smaller areas that are more so dense rather than expansive, and how they make these areas or these entire games feel really fun and engaging and replayable.
Hey, Super Cop, how many people you think are in Tame Impala?
I don't know. Maybe 4?
It's just one guy. Isn't that crazy? Wait, hold on. Let me pull them up.
Now, it's no mystery at this point here that I really like the Resident Evil 3 remake. Now, of course, I'll recognize Resident Evil 4 remake being one of the greatest fucking games ever made, but that doesn't change the fact that what's going on in Resident Evil 3 remake is very freaking similar to what's going on in Ground Zeroes. So, Resident Evil 3 remake is a very short game. An average playtime for someone who already knows what they're doing is about 2 hours, possibly even under 2 hours if you're fast enough. And that's not a hardcore speedrunning thing, like you can just get through this game pretty damn fast. But it's also really replayable and constantly fun. So let's talk about why. In Resident Evil 3 Remake, you're going to be returning to old areas, especially towards the start of the game, with new items. Think about your bolt cutters, think about your lockpicks. You'll find different upgrades for your guns, create shortcuts when you're running away from Nemesis later on. So that way, if you're in the same space, you can continue to reuse that same space, but make it feel fresh and interesting. Because of Resident Evil 3 Remake's short length, challenges are a lot more approachable. Again, I love Resident Evil 4 Remake, however when it says do a pistol only run, beat the game in under this time, beat the game but make sure to fundungle your splungus, it's a lot more daunting with such a big game, because then I'm not just thinking, okay, I just have to get through the village with my pistol. I'm like, okay, I gotta get through the village, I gotta fight Verdugo, I gotta go up against Krauser, I gotta go through the water room. Like, there's just a huge list of things that I'm going to have to be doing in order to do that challenge, so I'm less incentivized. But in Resident Evil 3 Remake, because I can go through the game so fast, I can start a new playthrough, going for a challenge, have it feel, attainable, and then at the same time, it adds a new layer to the game and gives me a reason to replay. Now, Resident Evil 3 Remake also does this cool thing that Halo Reach did back in the day, where you have bonuses to unlock through a point system. So you basically play the game, and when you do those aforementioned challenges, you get a certain amount of points that you can go into an extra section and purchase certain bonuses to take with you on your next playthrough. These could be things that make higher difficulties easier. They could be things that make it easier to speedrun. It could be a new weapon. It could be a new outfit. There's just something new to go at the game again with. And this extends past things that you would just do in gameplay. You can look at character models, you could look at concept art, and all sorts of little bonuses like that. And that's really fun because, for me, I really like looking at games I love and then seeing the process of how they were made. Like, how did this all come together? Appreciating model work and all that kind of stuff. It's really cool. On that note, Haunting Ground does this really cool thing where instead of having a menu like this, it's all in one room. So you can see the different things that you've unlocked and access New Game Plus content and special bonus modes in a physical space. And while I do like what Resident Evil's doing and all that, I'll always hold Haunting Ground on a pedestal, and I'm always going to bring this up because having just the menu turn into a physical interactive space instantly makes it better. And on the topic of Metal Gear Solid 5, this is very relevant. I'm looking at you, iDroid, you fucking piece of shit. The last thing that Resident Evil 3 Remake does that I really want to mention here is how you have different experiences on different difficulties. And this is outside the whole, oh yeah, if you play on this difficulty, it's a different experience because it's harder, because the enemies kill you faster. No. There's unique dialogue, there's different enemy placements, different weapons that you find at different times. So for example, if you start on easy, or assisted I think it's called, you start with an AR, which gives you a definite edge. Characters will also say more voice lines to give you hints about how to progress. And there's nothing like fresh dialogue to make a game interesting. On harder difficulties, you'll sometimes start with the Magnum. Harder enemies will be in places that they weren't before, and vice versa, so it keeps you on your toes. It's a whole new experience. So having a difficulty selection screen, cough cough Metal Gear Solid 5, is a great way to make a game feel more replayable. Another game that I definitely want to bring up here is BioShock 2. Because BioShock 2 is basically a bunch of different linear levels that you play through. However, these levels always feel fun to go to because there are a couple factors that keep them always feeling fresh no matter how many times you go onto them. So the first thing in BioShock 2 is turning security systems to your side. You see, Like Metal Gear, when you first enter an environment, it's incredibly hostile towards you. There's ways to be seen, ways to be attacked, traps that you have to worry about. However, Bioshock 2 allows you to turn cameras, drones, and certain traps onto your side. So whenever I enter into an area, it's not just, okay, I have to go through this is the checklist of things I have to do. I'm thinking, okay, which of these areas can I set up in a specific way to lure enemies to, so when they come to attack me, I have all of these automated systems to attack them and help me out. I feel like this would lend itself really well to a Metal Gear experience. Imagine if you could turn gun ciphers, security cameras, onto your side when an assault team is coming at you. Another cool thing that Bioshock 2 does is that, like Metal Gear Solid 5, it has characters that you can pick up, put on your shoulders, and escort out of the danger zone. Unlike Metal Gear Solid 5, these people that you're escorting can help you out. These little sisters can be used to collect more Atom for you, Atom being a currency used to level up in Bioshock. So when I'm picking up a little sister, I'm not just saving her, I'm also gaining something that's going to help me in the long run. And those are the only options. You can either have the sister gather stuff for you, or immediately save her, and there's no other choice. I said there's no other fucking choice! The last thing I want to mention with Bioshock 2 is that it has an active ecosystem that functions outside of player influence. So whether or not you interact with the enemies, those automated systems I brought up before, Big Daddies and Little Sisters, and Splicers will fight each other, interact with each other, try to find items. They have their own goals and their own objectives that either intertwine or are at odds with each other. Now, I know I've already been talking a little bit about how this could apply to Metal Gear generally, but let's get a little bit more specific now. So this outer layer of the donut can be that sort of dead space. However, it's not really going to be dead space because you're not really going to be fighting anything or in any serious danger. You're going to be doing your scouting here. So picture that donut again, except picture the outer layer of the donut being higher up than all the other layers. So when you're on this outer layer, you can look with your in-scope and mark and see everything. So even though you're not fighting, sabotaging, or sneaking quite yet, you're still using this space for that specific purpose. You're not just walking from point A to point B to try to get back to the gameplay. The icing area could be where you use weapons like sniper rifles, sabotage smaller Snake Eater-esque outpost, and maybe it's the area where you have that ground zeroes type cave for prisoners that you bring back. So if you're going into that inner layer and doing some dangerous shit, you can go back out into the icing and have certain safe points that you could leave prisoners. It's kind of like that middle zone. Basically, it's where you're gonna find, again, all your different weapons. You can engage enemies at comfortable distances because you could always move back a little bit towards the outer layer, or you could sneak in and blow up bases. This is where you can really experiment with the sandbox and learn the ways of the game. On the note of the Ground Zeroes cave, I would like to expand this a little bit more. Now, when you rescue prisoners and you bring them back to whatever little safe spot you have on the icing, I would like it if those prisoners that you rescued could become codec crew. So picture this, there's only a set amount of prisoners you could rescue in the world, and instead of them being a statistic, each one of them has their own kind of personality and story. So, I'm going to break canon and use certain characters just to paint an image in your head, so just think of this as a thought exercise. But imagine you're going around the icing and in one of the little bases, they have a little prison area and you find Paramedic there. So you rescue Paramedic, you bring her to your Ground Zeroes cave, and then Paramedic is like, okay, by the way, if you need any information about like the surrounding areas, the animals nearby, how to use them to your advantage, give me a call and I'll help you out. We could go even a little step further. Paramedic can say, oh, I was working on this special kind of sheep hat to help blend in with sheep while I take pictures and, study them. I left it at this other base, and if you go to grab it, it'll help you out. So not only is she a codec crew member, not only is she giving you helpful information, but she'll help you find certain items that you can use later on. We could have, you know, while we're going and getting this sheep hat, she could ask us maybe to take some photos for her, because now it's too dangerous for her to go out and take photos. This is also a really good way to get photo mode back into Metal Gear. I fucking missed that. But yeah, we go out, we use this sheep hat, we take photos of wildlife, we take it back to her, and we figure out a little bit about why she has, you know, an interest in wildlife, biology, and all these other different things she's into. Hell, maybe she even tells us about like movies or something. Like, it just adds to the game, you know? It's still a small game, a little bigger than Ground Zeroes, but if we have even like 6 prisoners, like Paramedic, that all come with their own little side quests, that all tell you about a certain item that you can find, and all have, you know, a codec kind of relationship that you unlock by finding them, I think that would be really cool, and it would make the game replayable. Because imagine you go through the game and you only rescue Paramedic, but then at the end of the game you see a statistic that says, hey, there were 5 other people that you could have found. There's a reason to go back and play the game again. So maybe you go and you find Sigint locked up somewhere, and he tells you about a secret MP5 SD that'll be really useful for when you need to stay quiet in the main base area and need something with a little bit more firepower. And then he also has a sub-story and codec things that it could do, you know? Like, it adds replayability and gives you a different order in how you can play things, so it's not just a straight rush to the base. So I mentioned before how the inner layer would work kind of like the heliport area for Ground Zeroes. On that note, this is the area where I would like to have the Humvee effect. Now, if you guys don't remember, the Humvee, or this kind of, I'm not sure, armored vehicles, my terminology might be wrong, but you have this armored vehicle that's a real threat. You see, you could CQC enemies, you can, you know, suppress headshot enemies, but if you get caught by this thing, if you don't have explosives, you either need to haul ass or you die. And that adds a whole nother layer of tension to the stealth. So in that inner area, right before you get to the jelly, right before you get to the main base, I would like to have a Humvee or some kind of enemy type like this that makes it very clear to you that if you fuck up stealth here, there are consequences, and that'll, you know, encourage the player to go back to the Icing and maybe look for more people to help you out over codec, maybe look for more weapons, or maybe see if there's a way you could sabotage a certain base that refuels this Humvee. But yeah, the general gist about the inner area is that planning is essential. You know, you gotta see, where are the cameras? When do the guards go to sleep? Where's the weak points? Where's the drainage tunnel that I can crawl through, you know? This is that hardcore stealth area that your preparation on the outer layer and on the Icing will really make or break how hard this area is for you. And again, the jelly is the interior of the base. It's a final gauntlet of just, I need to be super secret stealth man, I need to take out my cameras, I need to use different weapons to, you know, take out certain enemies, use certain items to not be seen, shoot out lights, you know, throw shaft grenades, get my way to the final boss, fight Metal Gear, fight that final boss, have a whole, you know, Fukushima type exposition about life and the meaning of this and how Snake learned a huge lesson, yada yada. That's the jelly.
Snake, it's me.
I'm going to touch you.
So yeah, like, again, this whole map wouldn't be much bigger than Ground Zeroes. So you could probably, if you really knew what you were doing and didn't go for a lot of the side stuff, you could probably beat this game in a little over 2 hours, like Resident Evil 3 Remake, or like Ground Zeroes as it already is. But the things that would add replayability would be unlocking your different allies to get different buffs in different orders to help you out. Maybe if you find Sigint first and get those weapons, it'll make it easier to rescue Paramedic at the base she's in. If you find Paramedic first, maybe it'll be easier to go after someone else and rescue them. Different difficulties could have different experiences. On easy mode, let's say you get an infinite trank pistol. That shit breaks Metal Gear, and if there was ever a gun that should be a infinite easy mode weapon, it's the fucking trank gun. On hard mode, let's say there's modifiers that you can add after you beat the game. Maybe you can buy a modifier in a little point-like system to get rid of suppressors. Maybe you can get something to make it easier, like adding regenerative health instead of using rations. Hell, you could even have like hard mode takes out certain people that you could find and rescue, or maybe it moves them to that inner area so you have to go somewhere more dangerous to get them. You could add certain findable or unlockable camos. Now, I'm a firm believer in the Halo 3 method of unlocking things, where you do something cool and you get something cool. So let's say you're playing through the game and you get all the pictures for Paramedic. She puts together a camouflage that has you perfectly blend in with the outer parts of the environment, making it easier to scout, sabotage, and all that kind of stuff on the outer layer and in the icing, because you know, she's looking at all the different animals and she's like, oh yes, I found the best kind of camouflage. And of course, since this is going to be a very short game, you could add in a whole bunch of challenges. Have it so you have a challenge where no one ever discovers a body knocked out or killed. You could have one where you go through purely non-lethal. You could have one where you have to speedrun. You could have one where you have to rescue every single one of those 6 people you can find. And then of course those challenges can give you points to unlock different modifiers or weapons or even certain outfits for later playthroughs. So at this point here you might be thinking, Pliskin, why make this video? And it's because I want to really push the point that I always bring up, but I feel like a lot of people don't get. Smaller games don't mean less. Ground Zeroes itself is a much better put together game than the Phantom Pain. I get more out of Ground Zeroes than I do the Phantom Pain, and that is because it is dense. There's replayability, there's different difficulties. So a smaller game allows you to put in more actual content, and a bigger game leads to more cut content or cut corners, like what we saw with Metal Gear Solid 5. So yeah, for the future of the series, before, you know, people start going in different forums and comment sections and being like, oh my god, we need an open world Metal Gear where you could go to different continents and there's all these different maps. Before you start asking for things like that, ask yourself, what is it about Metal Gear, and what is it about games in general that makes you enjoy them? So comment down below a smaller game that you can revisit time and time again that has different experiences and surprises you every now and then. I would really like to hear your experiences with that one game that looked like a tiny donut but ended up being packed to the brim with content. Anyways, this has been Pliskin, over and out.
This is Solid Snake. Hey, subscribe to Pliskin Boy. God damn it.
You heard him.